After our friends Sister Pauline, Sister Martha, Sister Nesta, and Sister Martin moved away from the convent on Louder Street last October, several members of the Ursuline community came together to try to make sure that we will value and preserve their legacy. We decided to learn all we could about the convent and its history. As usual, the Ursuline sisters were way ahead of us. We learned that the sisters had carefully archived materials from the Ursuline convent in Charlestown that was burned down in 1834, from the school they founded on Arlington Street in Boston a century later, and from their time here on Louder Street. As we began to explore these materials and the convent itself, our Ursuline heritage and the story of the Ursulines in Boston became more real to us than it had ever been before.
In the twilight of a sweltering August evening in 1834, groups of men are gathering on the Winter Hill Road in the Charlestown neighborhood of Boston, near the main gate of a Roman Catholic convent. It is Monday, and they have come here after rounds of drinks at the local tavern, following another backbreaking day's work. They are brickmakers, sailors, firemen, apprentices, and hooligans, Charlestown's poorest and least educated, and tonight they have a job to do. Cloistered inside are about a dozen Ursuline nuns who, in the last 8 years, have built an elegant brick boarding school for wealthy girls high on a hill encircled by the brickyards of Charlestown, where most of those in the crowd at the gate eke out a meager living.
The accounts vary a bit, but essentially, a few hundred men from Charlestown and Boston marched up Mount Benedict and arrived at the main front door of the convent, where they had a confrontation with the Mother Superior, who basically told them to get lost. Unfortunately, they didn't, and they had brought with them tubs of tar, which they then lit, and they lit torches from. So once the Mother Superior had a sense that these guys were serious and that they weren't going away, she ordered her colleagues, the nuns, to rouse the boarders from their dormitories and get them out the back. So all of the nuns and all of the students escaped out the back of the convent just about at the moment that the windows started to be broken and torches started to be flung into the buildings that comprised the convent and the school. The students and nuns ran to the back of the property where there was a fence, and the little ones actually couldn't get over it and had to be boosted by bigger students. And ultimately they ran into Charlestown and were taken in by friendly members of the population. Meanwhile, back up at the convent, the entire institution was systematically looted of all property, all valuables, and then systematically burned to the ground. And not only did the looting and vandalism happen on one night, people actually came back the second night to finish the job.
On the day after the fire, Bishop Fenwick sent carriages for the nuns who were scattered around various houses in Charlestown. They were brought back to Boston to lodge with the Sisters of Charity, where they received every attention that can possibly be imparted to them and every comfort for which a small contracted house can afford. The 8 Ursulines would remain in the small house of the Sisters of Charity for 2 months.
The Federal Hill Farm, otherwise known as the Ursuline Convent, was built between 1906 and 1908. Mr. Francis Skinner had it built for his wife as a bit of a belated wedding present, about 6 years or so after they were married. And it was built really modeling after English landscapes and architecture that he had seen in his travels.
My grandfather was Arthur Brennan, and when he came to the Skinner estate, it was 1908. And the reason why he became employed was he was a car salesman in Cambridge, and Mr. Skinner wanted to buy his first automobile. My grandfather sold it to him, and Mr. Skinner said that he would like my grandfather to come along with the car and be the chauffeur. And my grandfather moved to Dedham. He moved on to the Skinner property, and he was the chauffeur for Mr. Skinner and Mrs. Skinner, and continued on after Mr. Skinner's death and worked for then Mrs. Shea until her death in 1956. So he had a 48-year career here on this beautiful, what is now a campus, but at Federal Hill Farm. I did see on the 1940 census, by that time Mrs. Skinner was married to Mr. Shea, I did see that he worked 70 hours. That was one of the questions, how many hours did you work during the week of such and such in April of 1940? And his answer was 70 hours. And I do believe that that was an average week for him when his employers were in town. When they weren't in town, I think it was more of a regular job where he would come over during the day and he could spend some time with his family. And his duties, at first he was a chauffeur, and he continued in that capacity throughout his 48 years. But as time went on and as he built more longevity as a staff member, he was given more duties, and he did become general manager after a time.
I remember clearly the Sunday when my father said it was about maybe 2 or 3 weeks before school started. And I had gone to the same academy from my first grade to my freshman year. And I was going into my sophomore year. And Sunday dinner, we were all sitting around the table, and Mom and Dad are sitting there, and Dad says, you know, we think you need a change. You need a change. And my colleagues, a lot of them have daughters who've gone to Ursuline. Would you like to visit that place? And he got up from the dining room table, called Ursuline on Arlington Street, and Mother Claveria answered the phone. She said, sure, come on up, because it was a Sunday afternoon. And we visited, and from that time on, for me, it was just wonderful. We were right from the Boston Gardens, right across the street from the Boston Gardens in Convent, and we were small classes. My senior class was 14 students, so that will give you an idea what's small, what I mean by small. I was selected to come out and introduce the freshmen who were out here to what it meant to be an Ursuline girl. And I did so on the front stairs, from those steps in the lobby there, and the girls were all seated in the main room, that entry. They were all seated in their little uniforms, and I was in my uniform, and I shared what it meant to be an Ursuline student, and it was wonderful, because by that time we probably had, for the freshman class, we might have had 25 or so new young students who were coming, and it was the beginning of the larger classes. And then I did come for the groundbreaking when they had the blessing, actually not groundbreaking, the blessing of the building, when the building was up. For some reason, I so wanted to come to the kindergarten. I wasn't really of kindergarten age. I was a little bit young, and she told me that I just harassed her incessantly until one day in March, she phoned the nuns and asked if I could come over and try school, and she thought maybe because I wasn't 5 yet that maybe I would just tire of it in a day. And I remember my first day, it was cold and I had on little coveralls. I remember what I was wearing. And I remember running across diagonally through the grand hall to the parlor where the kindergarten was, and I was absolutely thrilled to be there. And I went to school there for 1.5 years until it was time to go to first grade. Let's start with what stayed the same, because that's what's so important, is the values education, which is so strong. And the faculty is wonderful for helping young people learn values today, good Christian values. That's the core. And the spirit of Serviam is strong today, if not stronger, especially because of the possibilities that are available to the girls. Yet, Arlington Street in the late 50s was considered among the finest in the Boston area. We really were. Now, a little anecdotal piece. We were the first ones to get plaid skirts. The first year I was at Ursuline in Arlington Street, we had green jumpers, which a lot of the Catholic schools had. They had jumpers, you know, with a little bolero for formal occasions with the school seal on it, you know. And you had to wear nylons, and you had to wear the same shoes. Now, you people can wear your choice of shoe, which is, you don't think that's such a big deal. To us, that would have been a big deal. Then my junior year was when they went into the Campbell plaid skirts and the green blazers. So it's nice to see that it's still there. And it's a nice tradition because we were one of the first.
Sister Ursula was so very, very loving. She just always made me feel loved. She was very sweet, and I remember she taught us little songs in French, and she always had interesting games and always had very fun art projects. When my mom passed away, we had the wake at Doherty's in Dedham, and of course I was devastated. I was a grown woman. It was in 1995, and I just stood there. I didn't know what to do. People were starting to come in, and then all of a sudden I looked across the room, and it was Sister Ursula and another sister, and she told me that she had seen the announcement in the paper that day, and nothing could keep her away. And she hugged me, and I just felt like everything would be fine, and it was after that.
In the course of researching the house, we realized that we really needed some expert advice. So I asked my friend William Young, who works for the City of Boston and the Historical Landmark Commission, if he would be willing to walk through, tell us what he sees, evaluate the artisanship, the materials, the general aesthetic of the property.
Might it have been a little dark for a library? I mean, I
No,
guess
libraries were considered, you know, really, you know, masculine spaces.
I think the school is so wise to recognize what an opportunity in the life of the institution is before it now. This property can really be the new face of the school.
From the Charlestown Convent, we've recovered things like a piece of burnt brick and a piece of burnt wood from the original structure. We also found the school bell, actually it was the chapel bell, from the Ursuline Convent in Charlestown, that somehow survived the destruction. We also learned that we have in our possession a ciborium that was used in the Mount Benedict Convent for Mass, and which was lost to the Ursulines for about 100 years. Incidentally, there are some pieces of the Charlestown Convent still in existence, and if you go to the Cathedral of the Holy Cross in the South End, you can actually see where pieces of that building, of the ruins from that convent, were saved and then used in the building of the new cathedral about 20 years later. So it's a very powerful metaphor, as if to say, you tried to drive the Catholics out of Boston and it did not work. We found additionally lots of stuff from the Arlington Street School, including the sign from the school that says Ursuline Academy, a school for girls. It's a great period piece, and I'd love to have it hanging somewhere on our property for us all to enjoy still. And we haven't even begun to tap the archival material in terms of documentary evidence that the nuns carefully preserved and left for us to catalog and pass along to future generations.
I think one goal we have is to just make a whole list of everything in the archives so that we can catalog it so that it's available for anyone that wants to use it. So anyone at Ursuline will be able to know exactly what's down there and where they can find it.
The beautiful chalice that was donated to the school is from a wonderful alumna from the class of 1958, Ramon DeHickey. She and her sister and brother actually had kept their parents' wedding rings. And so when their parents passed, they obviously inherited all of their parents' belongings, and the rings were one of them. So they took her mother's engagement ring with the diamond. They removed the diamond and put that as the center of the cross on the chalice. And then they took the two wedding rings and they interlocked them on the base underneath the chalice. So it's just a very beautiful symbol of love and faith. And we're so blessed that they chose to bestow this gift upon us and upon the school. It's one of the most beautiful artifacts that we've been given over the years. And to know that it came from an alumna who herself is so religious and her family was so religious, it's just pretty incredible, and I think speaks to the fact that our alums aren't just graduates of the school, they're family members, they're sisters, you know, they really feel this strong connection to the place that they went and the women that they went to school with. At one point, my favorite part of our history, or one of my favorite parts of our history, is the sisters took the students out to the front of the convent, or the mansion at the time, and had them look out over the grand land that was in front of them, the estate, and said, this is where we'll build our future, this is where we'll build our dream. And you were here and you were witnessing the beginning of this.
With genealogy and family history, when a person goes back to find out more about their family's history, they find a sense of who they are, where they came from. And I hope that with the archives being available to students and faculty, the school can rediscover who it is as a school. And I also hope that the convent will remain a place where students can come and remind themselves of our Catholic identity. And with the expansion of the school grounds and the school population, that this will be a place that students can always come back to.
A saying you know of St. Angela's, it's change according to the times. Now, she wrote that in 1535, which is wonderful. I mean, it's extraordinary. And I believe that you are, right now, the change for now. And I also believe that it's your responsibility to carry that change further.
We are not sure what the future of this building will be, the convent. All I can say for my part is I hope it's treasured and preserved, because it is an absolute gem, and it's a great gift to give Ursuline students of the future access to this wonderful property, which is so architecturally stunning, and to continue the legacy of the Ursuline sisters who lived here. I hope that we would use this building to foster students' growth as they learn about and live out the mission of Ursuline Academy. But we're starting a new chapter here. This is, I guess, the third chapter of this property. We've had the Skinners and the Shays, we've had the sisters, and now I think we're going to have the students. At least I hope so.
You put the light